Unveiling Secrets, a tale of love, luxury, and trust. Serenity woke up early and decided to check who was at the gate. It turned out to be Mr. Zen, the lobby manager of Wiltspoon Hotel, carrying 2 bags of breakfast. Serenity was surprised that Zachary had ordered breakfast from the hotel when she was with him the whole night. She knew he enjoyed discounts there, being an employee of York Corporation, but she was concerned that he was spending too much money. Thanking Mr. Zen, Serenity offered to pay for the breakfast, but he insisted that Zachary would take care of it. Serenity explained that as his wife, they were family, and his money was hers too. However, Mr. Zen had already set a reasonable price and accepted payment through Apple Pay. Back in the house, Serenity found Zachary coming down the stairs. She had already set up the breakfast on the dining table, using plates and cutlery instead of disposable containers. She expressed her willingness to cook for him in the future to save money on expensive food deliveries. Zachary, however, wanted to treat her and see her enjoy the hotel breakfast. He assured her that his expenses were under control, even with the mortgage on the villa. Serenity acknowledged that he sent her money for household expenses, but she felt it was unnecessary since they didn't have children yet. Zachary then embraced Serenity, explaining that he ordered breakfast to spare her from cooking and wanted her to enjoy the luxury. He assured her that he could afford it and loved seeing her relish the food. Despite Zachary's reassurances, Serenity still expressed the importance of saving money, considering their mortgage and expensive tastes. Since Serenity and Zachary didn't have children yet, they could enjoy a comfortable lifestyle with the finer things in life. Serenity suggested that she could contribute to some of the household expenses to save money and pay off the mortgage early. However, she made it clear that she wouldn't help with the mortgage as it was Zachary's house, and she wanted to keep their assets separate, avoiding potential complications in the future. Zachary assured her that he could manage the mortgage payments and would receive a year-end bonus, being a senior executive, which would help. He reminded her that he had promised to provide for her and that he made a significant down payment on the villa. Serenity raised the issue of Zachary's expensive tastes and dining at high-end restaurants. She had pointed it out before but respected his decisions, choosing not to push the matter further. She mentioned that she prefers living in their house in Brenfield as it was more accessible, but he assured her that both places were their home, and they could spend short breaks and holidays there. When asked about her plans for the day, Serenity mentioned visiting her sister's rented shop and helping her out. She also revealed her plan to dine with Jasmine at an Italian restaurant that night. Zachary mistakenly thought she was inviting him, but Serenity clarified that it would be just the two of them. Zachary buried his head in his breakfast, realizing that it had nothing to do with him and that he was not invited to the dinner. Zachary was excited about his company's upcoming annual dinner and extended an invitation to Serenity as his +1. He mentioned that she would need a gown for the event and suggested they could either drive together or he could pick her up. Serenity, on the other hand, wasn't particularly keen on attending social events, except for the delicious food they usually offered. Nevertheless, she agreed to go with Zachary, aware that she might have to control her eating a bit if she didn't want to draw attention to herself as the overindulgent +1. As the conversation about the company's annual dinner continued, Zachary proposed that they could bring a family member along, just like others did. Serenity was taken aback by this idea and stared at Zachary, not quite sure what to say. She wasn't an employee of the company, and she didn't see any reason why she should attend their annual dinner. However, Zachary was determined and reassured her, saying that he wanted her to accompany him, and it was entirely acceptable to bring a +1. The topic then shifted to the past behavior of Zachary and his colleague, Josh, during previous company dinners. Zachary used to deliver his speech and then leave the event early to allow the employees to enjoy themselves without feeling restricted by his presence. Josh, being more sociable, would stay and interact with everyone, but he would often bring a family member as his plus one to avoid any unwanted attention from female colleagues. With Jasmine around now, Serenity considered whether Josh would ask her to be his plus one. However, she decided not to meddle in Jasmine's decisions and kept her thoughts to herself. After breakfast, Zachary dropped Serenity back at their home in Brinfield before rushing off to work. Serenity wasted no time and asked Mrs. Lane to get ready, to visit Liberty's place. However, upon arriving, they found Liberty absent, having gone to her shop early in the morning. Serenity then decided to drive to her sister's shop directly. Since renovations hadn't started yet, Liberty was busy organizing things and keeping herself occupied. Sonny, her son, was running around the shop, free to explore as a glass door had been installed, making it safe for him to play without the risk of wandering outside. When Duncan appeared, Sonny seemed frightened and quickly ran to his mother. Duncan held a pinwheel in his hand, attempting to give it to the little boy, but it seemed that his scarred appearance still made Sonny uneasy. Liberty greeted Duncan with a warm smile, questioning his unexpected visit. He explained that he passed by her shop regularly and finally decided to drop in for a look. Duncan was trying to ease the tension and make a friendly gesture towards Sonny, but it appeared that his appearance might take some time for the little boy to get used to. Duncan attempted to give the pinwheel to Sonny, but Sonny refused to take it from him. Duncan explained that he had seen the pinwheel at a toy store and thought Sonny might enjoy it on a windy day. He had dropped by the shop specifically to give Sonny the gift. Liberty accepted the pinwheel on Sonny's behalf, and the boy took it from her. Duncan jokingly commented on how Sonny seemed scared of him but quickly clarified that he meant Liberty was Sonny's closest person as his mother, which was why he took the pinwheel from her. Curious about Liberty's activities at the shop, Duncan asked what she was busy with since the place appeared spotless. Liberty shared that she had bought materials for the upcoming renovations but was mainly just passing the time there for now. Duncan playfully remarked that she seemed to be losing weight faster than when he first asked her to run 5 rounds at the office. Liberty attributed her weight loss to a strict diet without sugar and fats and mentioned that she had lost 20 pounds since her divorce from Hank. Duncan encouraged her to keep up the good work. As Duncan was about to leave for a meeting, he noticed the pinwheel brought joy to Sonny. He playfully squeezed the boy's cheek before saying goodbye. Sonny wasn't too pleased with the surprise affection but reluctantly waved back as Liberty insisted. After Duncan left the shop, he ran into Mrs. Brown, who had just arrived. Seeing Duncan interact with Sonny, Mrs. Brown became suspicious and wondered if Duncan was pursuing Liberty. She couldn't fathom why someone like Liberty, who was divorced, would be desirable. However, upon seeing Duncan's scarred face, she assumed that his looks were the reason for his difficulty in finding a partner and speculated that he might be targeting a divorced woman like Liberty. Mrs. Brown was unhappy with Duncan's presence near Liberty's shop. She knew Duncan was the boss of a wealthy company, despite his scarred face, and she had observed Liberty working there while waiting for her in the past. Mrs. Brown was worried that Liberty's successful career might overshadow her son, Hank, which created tension in their marriage. Now that they were divorced, Hank didn't have to worry about that anymore. Mrs. Brown was also unhappy about the possibility of her son, Hank, marrying his mistress, Jessica, despite her objections. When Duncan noticed it was Mrs. Brown, he confronted her and warned her not to cause trouble as he rented the shop to Liberty. Mrs. Brown accused Duncan of trying to chase after Liberty. Duncan clarified that he owned several commercial spaces there, including Liberty's shop, and it was none of her business what he did there. He also reminded Mrs. Brown that Liberty was no longer related to the Browns due to the divorce. Mrs. Brown came to the shop to see her grandson, Sonny, who was Liberty's child. She claimed that Liberty said they could visit Sonny anytime they wanted after the divorce. Duncan was taken aback by her audacity. Mrs. Brown confidently stated that her son would get back together with Liberty, implying that Duncan had no chance with her. Duncan found the situation amusing since he wasn't pursuing Liberty and was merely fond of Sonny, which was why he brought the pinwheel as a gift. He knew Liberty would never get back together with Hank, even if he wanted to rekindle the relationship. Deciding not to engage further, Duncan left the shop, not being too invested in Liberty's personal life unless Mrs. Brown tried to create trouble. Sonny, Mrs. Brown greeted warmly as she entered the shop and presented a toy car she had brought along. She wanted to win over her grandson's affection despite the tensions between the adults. Liberty had moved on after the divorce and was willing to keep things civil in front of Sonny, recognizing that he was Hank's father. She refrained from speaking negatively about Hank's family in front of him. Sonny acknowledged his grandparents and father, responding to Mrs. Brown's greeting. However, he showed more interest in the pinwheel Duncan had given him than the new toy car. Mrs. Brown sensed that Duncan might be trying to get closer to Liberty through Sonny. She believed that for a divorcee with a son, it was essential for the man to accept and care for her child as his own. She knew that Sonny was her grandson and wouldn't consider Duncan as his father. Ignoring Sonny's preference for the pinwheel, Mrs. Brown tried to take it away and replace it with the new toy car she had brought. However, Sonny refused and became upset, not wanting to part with the pinwheel. Frustrated with Duncan's attempt to win Sonny's favor, Mrs. Brown eventually gave up and took Sonny in her arms. She asked Liberty if Duncan had visited her with romantic intentions, but Liberty dismissed the idea and stated that it was her personal business. Mrs. Brown cautioned Liberty about being careful with anyone pursuing a romantic relationship with her, suggesting that they might be after her wealth. Liberty had become a millionaire after the divorce, thanks to the money from her son's father. Liberty, focused on her work, didn't want to discuss her personal life with Mrs. Brown. She asked Mrs. Brown to concentrate on her son's wedding with Jessica instead. Mrs. Brown complained about Jessica, expressing her dissatisfaction with her extravagant spending. Mrs. Brown believed that Jessica was trying to take advantage of Hank's financial generosity for the wedding and family support. She felt that Jessica was already given enough gifts in the past. Jessica wants the reception at Wiltspoon Hotel. Can you imagine the cost? We're the ones paying for the reception. Instead of marrying for love, Hank is marrying himself into debt. Mrs. Brown complained, expressing her frustration about Jessica's demands and spending habits. Liberty listened quietly, knowing that her former mother-in-law came to vent about Jessica's behavior. Mrs. Brown remarked sarcastically, "It's not like she can lay a golden egg." Liberty continued to wipe the table, refraining from giving her opinion on the matter. Mrs. Brown then commented on Liberty's weight loss and questioned whether she had been skipping meals. Liberty reminded Mrs. Brown that they were no longer family and she didn't need her concern. Mrs. Brown changed the subject and asked if Liberty's aunt was supporting her in setting up the shop. She suggested that Liberty's aunt, who was wealthy, could offer better help than the Browns. Liberty asserted that she had the startup capital she needed and didn't require her aunt's financial support. Mrs. Brown was taken aback by Liberty's refusal to seek help from her aunt. Liberty explained that her aunt had offered her and Serenity a villa and a lump sum of money to start a business, but they had turned down the offer. Mrs. Brown couldn't believe Liberty's decision to reject such a generous gesture. Before the conversation could continue, Serenity and Mrs. Lane entered the shop. Seeing Mrs. Brown, Serenity's demeanor changed, and she warned the older woman not to cause trouble. Mrs. Brown assured them that she was there to see Sonny and had brought him a toy. She quickly decided to leave, not wanting to cause any tension. "Liberty, I have to leave now. I'll visit you and Sonny some other time," Mrs. Brown hastily said before quickly making her way out. Serenity carried Sonny out of the shop and watched Mrs. Brown get into a taxi. Once the old lady had gone, Serenity questioned why Mrs. Brown suddenly wanted to see Sonny. Sonny held the toy car that Mrs. Brown had given him, but when Serenity asked if he liked it, he replied, "No, I have a lot of toy cars." Sonny suggested giving the toy car to his friend Lucas, but Serenity explained that Lucas wouldn't take his toys anymore. Sonny then decided to give the toy car to Jenny, his neighbor's little girl with whom he had played dates. Serenity brought Sonny back into the shop and asked Liberty about Jenny. Liberty confirmed that Jenny was their neighbor's daughter, and Serenity placed the toy car on the table, saying it was for Jenny. Serenity was skeptical about Mrs. Brown's visit, and Liberty sarcastically agreed, revealing that Mrs. Brown had come to complain about Hank and Jessica's extravagant wedding expenses. Serenity felt that Hank and Jessica deserved the financial burden. She expressed her hope for drama in the Brown family and suggested Liberty find a better man for her next marriage as best revenge. She even offered to introduce her to eligible men through Zachary's family. However, Liberty dismissed the idea, explaining that she was focused on making money, buying a car and a house, and providing a good future for Sonny. For Liberty, another marriage was not a priority. She was more concerned with securing a stable and successful future for herself and her son. Serenity expressed her understanding that Liberty wasn't currently considering another marriage, but she wondered if Liberty planned to remain single forever. Liberty responded that she felt content being free and independent, not having to deal with in-laws or marital issues. She realized why many women chose not to marry, appreciating her newfound happiness after divorce. Liberty reassured Serenity not to worry about her and emphasized her happiness in her current state. However, she reminded Serenity that her situation shouldn't discourage her from pursuing marriage with Zachary, whom Liberty regarded as a reliable guy. Serenity expressed concern for Zachary's health and reminded him to take care of himself, particularly during cold weather. Liberty mentioned her plan to go to the market to buy spices for making her own sauce and appetizers for her business. Serenity offered to accompany her sister to the market, and together with Mrs. Lane, they purchased the necessary spices. Back at Liberty's apartment, she began preparing the condiments and appetizers for her business. Serenity then brought up that Zachary had kept something from her. Mrs. Lane overheard the conversation, wondering if Zachary had confessed everything to Serenity. Liberty advised her sister to communicate with Zachary and get his perspective on the matter, as everyone has their secrets and married couples don't necessarily share everything. Zachary owns a luxurious villa in an upscale residential area with stunning views. I researched and found that such villas start at $10 million. He told me that he earns millions annually and has saved a considerable amount to buy the villa, but he still has a mortgage on it. Liberty was taken aback by this revelation. Serenity reassured her that it was Zachary's property, and she didn't intend to claim any share in it, even if they were to separate. Liberty advised Serenity to invest in their marriage and not to talk about separation, as she hoped her sister would have a successful and happy marriage, unlike her own. Mrs. Lane listened to their conversation anxiously, aware that Zachary had not been entirely honest about his true identity. He had revealed that he owned a villa but had kept some details hidden. Serenity explained that she was initially angry but understood Zachary's perspective. She had chosen to trust him and not press the issue. Liberty inquired if there were other things Zachary might be hiding, and Serenity responded that it was challenging to know what goes on in men's minds. Liberty then asked if Serenity had ever doubted Zachary's identity, implying whether he might be more than a salaryman. Serenity dismissed the thought, stating that many people with the last name York worked at York Corporation but were not related to the wealthy York family. She also mentioned that Zachary didn't fit the profile of an heir. Despite sharing the last name with the wealthy Yorks, Liberty never suspected that her brother-in-law could be the heir. She believed marrying into such a prestigious family would be challenging due to their social standing. However, she had met Zachary's family and found them to be down-to-earth and friendly, not fitting the stereotype of the wealthy elite. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, La Novela de Voz, and hit all from the notification bell, so you will get notified whenever a new video is uploaded. Thank you.